Arsene Wenger says African club football, that is, developing club football in Africa, is the key for Africa closing the gap on Europe and South America. Let's put it this way: when an African country wins the World Cup, the day an African country wins the World Cup, it will be because African club football finally caught up with the best leagues in the world. That's a big ask. But as an African who is passionate about African football, one of the biggest questions I have, and I know you have it too if you love African football, is whether we will ever see an African nation win the FIFA World Cup. Or to put it differently, what must Africa do to produce a winner of the game's biggest prize? On today's episode of World Football Africa, I take a swing at these questions and I want to come at them from the angle of the just concluded Afcon, because Wenger actually made his comments as a sort of post-Afcon analysis, and he was essentially addressing whether, on the basis of what we saw at the Afcon, one can argue that the standard of African football is trending upwards and moving the continent closer to its first World Cup title. Now, before I go any further, let me thank you for watching and or subscribing to this channel. So, did the 2023 Afcon move Africa closer to winning the biggest prize in football? Let's consider Arsene Wenger's comments. Now, if you don't know who Arsene Wenger is, well, the Frenchman needs little introduction to the average football fanatic. But just in case, Wenger is currently the chief of global football development at FIFA. So this is the guy in charge of the mega docket of developing the sport around the world. Of course, Wenger is more famous for his 22 years as manager of Arsenal FC in England, the highlight of which was winning the Premier League title unbeaten in the 2003-2004 season. Personally, he's my favorite manager of all time, and that is all I'm going to say about my leanings in European club football. Anyways, after the Afcon, Wenger observed that there have been remarkable improvements since the last tournament. Overall, it was a tournament of small margins between the teams. The phenomena that we have seen there is that there was little space to play. The compactness of the team was what we had already seen in Doha at the 2022 World Cup, and it looks to be the trend in the world that teams don't give space away. Wenger added, these African countries lose their players because they cannot afford to keep them, and we need to build stronger clubs, and to make stronger clubs, to have stronger competitions is vital, because that was the success in Europe. They have stronger clubs and good education, and we want that to develop that as well in Africa. To deconstruct Wenger's comments, let's start by looking at where the players at Afcon 2023 play their club football. Not surprisingly, the majority of them came from Europe, and as expected, the largest number of those came from the French League. There were 80 in total. 50 came from the Premier League and 20 apiece from the German Bundesliga and Italian Serie A. From African leagues, 29 came from South Africa, 19 from Tanzania and Egypt apiece, 4 apiece from Morocco and Tunisia. So we can see by the numbers that African club football is an outsider at the Afcon, its own event. And Wenger's argument is that has to change if African football is to make real strides. And at this point, congratulations are due to the South African side, which had every player in their 26-man squad, bar one, based in Africa. In fact, 24 of the 26 are based in South Africa, and it was so refreshing to see the Bafana go all the way to the semi-finals. It proved that it's possible to do well at the Afcon with a team full of African-based players. Of course, we all remember Egypt dominating the Afcon, winning the 1-3 consecutive titles between 2006 and 2010, being largely based on home-based players. The side that completed the three-peat of those African titles, something which, by the way, had never been done before or has never been done since, had 19 of the 23 players in the squad based in Egypt. In fact, it's worth stressing that Egypt's record haul of 7 African titles owes largely to the use of home-based footballers. Of course, the counter-argument is that Egypt have never gone beyond the round of 16 in their 3 World Cup appearances. In other words, although relying on home-based players has served them well at the Afcon, it has done them little favors at the World Cup. So that cannot be the right formula for an African nation with intentions of winning the World Cup. For the sake of contrast, the Morocco side that reached the semis at the 2022 FIFA World Cup had only 3 players based in Africa, or Morocco to be precise, 2 are based in Asia and 24 in Europe. Morocco's success therefore suggests that the best strategy for winning the World Cup from an African perspective is by building and assembling teams full of Europe-based players, because that is where the best football is played. But let us remember one thing. Morocco is the first African country in the 94-year history of the World Cup to reach the semi-finals. Now, an optimist might look at that and say, see, Africa is getting close. And sure, who knows if an African nation will go on and win the title in 2026. So we must grant that it is a possibility. But obviously, it's a highly unlikely possibility. I mean, look at the number of teams Morocco had to go past before being eliminated by France in the semi-finals in Qatar, Croatia, Belgium, Spain, and Portugal. The level of excellence and consistency required to reach the World Cup semi-finals, let alone go on and win the whole thing, is extremely high. Basically, a team has to have immense organization, great tactical execution, world-class talent, etc., to win the World Cup. I mean, see how difficult it was for Lionel Messi to win the thing. It took him 5 tries, and even the successful one went through 2 penalty shootouts, including 1 in the dramatic final. So an African team winning the World Cup can happen, but it would most likely take the path that Ivory Coast took to win the 2023 Afcon. Ivory Coast took the path not so much less traveled, but totally uncharted. I mean, it's unlike anything we've ever seen at the Afcon. You know how they did it, or rather, no one really knows how they did it, because it was sheer senselessness. To look at one instance from Ivory Coast FAIRYTALE, in their quarterfinal against Mali, their chances of winning the Afcon fell to 1% when it clocked 90 minutes and Mali were leading 1-0 at the time. You know the story. 10-man Ivory Coast soon scored an equalizer through Simon Adingra before going on to score the winner in extra time. Ivory Coast's path to the title was totally unique and in many ways unconvincing and paradoxical, because at a tournament that saw the highest number of goals ever scored in history, 119, Ivory Coast only averaged an XG of 0.96 goals. Ivory Coast spent only 18.8% of match time in a winning position, 145 minutes, 39 seconds in total. That was exactly half the proportion of time spent winning as Angola, and less than half that of Nigeria, Morocco, and Senegal. Incredibly, Ivory Coast spent 95 minutes and 50 seconds longer in a losing position than they did in a winning position at the tournament. Can such a team win the World Cup? Can the Nigeria team they beat in the final win the World Cup? Arsene Wenger's comments, though complimentary of some positives at the Afcon, clearly called for improvements in the quality of the game. Where he talks about the need to build stronger clubs and to make stronger clubs to have stronger competitions, is clearly making a reference to the gaps in the quality of the football exhibited at the Afcon. And as long as those gaps remain, the chances of an African nation winning the World Cup in 2026 or in the near future will remain mathematical. Europe will remain the destination of choice for Africa's best talents for years to come. But teams like Germany and France dominate the World Cup because they are able to develop their national teams by developing their players at underage competitions before refining them through their domestic leagues. That helps to build continuity and an identity, a style of play, something often rare in international football. The best African nations often fail to maximize their talent at World Cups because their players are often assembled from different clubs and schools of thought. The best option, as Wenger said, is for Africa to develop its own club competitions. Although the more realistic option in the short term, at least, is probably to find a hybrid between the local and foreign strategy of team building. Can it be done? I guess the right question is, do we have a choice? Thanks for watching World Football Africa.